three. Hello, everyone. It's me, your Lich Junior, and we're back with, oh my god, it's episode 5 of the Mite No podcast. Everyone's favorite One Piece rewatch podcast, I'm sure. I'm joined today by both of my lovely co-hosts, which is fantastic. Rudy and Noriko. Say hello, everybody.
Yeah. Wow.
So enthusiastic. I love it. Good energy for today. So we are covering episodes 21 through 25. We are just zooming through the East Blue. Or almost halfway there. Halfway there. And we open episode 21 with Patty singing in the bathroom while he picks his nose hairs. Because that's what you want your chef to be doing. You
I don't
want him.
remember that part.
Yeah, that's that's how it starts. One of the other restaurant customers goes to the bathroom, and Patty is singing to himself and being very crass about how the customer is the most important thing, and he's picking his nose hairs, looking in the mirror. We cut out to Sanji being a tough guy, and we get this beautiful moment where Full Body says he's gonna go contact the Marines and get you all shut the fuck down. And Sanji's reaction is, then I guess I better kill you. which 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 is really good. Um I love it. It's such a good moment where the other chefs run out to try and stop Sanji from just murdering this lieutenant. um at which point Luffy and Zeph fall through the floor cuz Luffy was being indignant, uh, and Zeph started wrestling with him, I guess, because Zeph, I don't know, he likes that. Um, at which point, one of the Marines shows up at the door and lets them know that their prisoner had escaped, and they sort of lay it up here that they had captured the prisoner 3 days ago, and he was already starving, and they hadn't fed him since capturing him. Um, and that he was a member of Don Krieg's crew. Um, which is our first time really hearing the name Krieg outside of, I think, maybe the wanted posters. The Marine ends up getting shot in the back. Don't worry, he's fine. He just crawls away when Full Body leaves because bullets don't kill people unless they're in a flashback in One Piece. And then we meet Gin. Gin's a good boy. I've always I've always loved Gin. This starving pirate shows up, walks his way over to one of the tables, sits down, and asks for food. He says, I don't care what you bring me, but please bring me some food. So Patty walks over to him, this big burly cook, and he's like, all right, sir, do you have money to pay for that food? And Gin's like, I got a pistol. How about a bullet to your head? And Patty beats the fuck out of him. He's like, well, you're not a customer if you're not paying, so I guess I can just beat the shit out of you. Um, However, we do at this point see Sanji quietly walk away and go upstairs towards the kitchens because for some reason they thought that putting the kitchen on the second floor was smart here. I don't know. I think that's dumb as shit. Uh, and both Zeph and Luffy get a little reaction of seeing Sanji walk upstairs. So while Patty is beating the shit out of Gin, Full Body crawls away, and we see the Marine who got shot in the back crawling away too, because I guess he's fine, because bullets don't hurt people. They just mildly stun them for a few minutes. Um, Patty then takes Gin and tosses him at the back and just says, fucking leave, and don't come back unless you have money. I'm like, if you want to be a customer here, have cash. Piss off. Uh, Luffy goes outside on the balcony to sort of watch, because, I mean, he knows that Gin is a pirate of a big pirate crew, so he's curious. At which point, Sanji shows up with a plate of food and sets it down in front of Gin and a glass of water and tells him to eat. And now that Gin's not, like, demanding the food and holding people hostage, he refuses because he thinks it would hurt his pride to accept charity now that he's not in control of the situation. To which Sanji basically says, Then fucking die for your pride. But being hungry really fucking sucks, doesn't it? I think it's more important to live, don't you? And Gin starts to cry and eat the food, and Luffy in that moment decides that Sanji is the bestest of boys, and he will have him. Because that is how Luffy works. Um, so Gin eats up all the food, gobbles it up really good. Um, has some cute moments with the boys. Um, we do see inside at some point when this was happening um that Zeph uh like they can't keep wait staff at the restaurant. So they end up making Luffy a waiter or a chore boy. Because of how rough the crew is of the cooks. All their wait staff keep running away. Luffy decides to tell Sanji to join his crew. Um, at which point, that he says no because he has something to do with this restaurant. Uh, to which point, Luffy yells, "I refuse!" And Sanji goes, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I refuse your refusal of my invitation to join my crew. You don't get to say no. I said you're a member of my crew. You're taking it." Which was fantastic. At which point Sanji says, "No, you need to listen to me." And Luffy goes, "All right, well, tell me why you can't come." And he's like, "Well, no, that's personal. I'm not going to tell you." And Luffy goes, "You just told me to listen to you." It's good shtick. It's really good dialogue between the pair of them. Um, Gin questions Luffy about his intentions. Luffy says he's going to be king of the pirates. He's going to go to the Grand Line. And we discover that Gin has some uh, PTSD about the Grand Line, basically. Um, which is pretty. They really ham it up. He asks Luffy how many members are in his crew, and Luffy goes, including Sanji, 5. And Sanji goes, "Don't count me." I also love that Sanji, the man whose name is 3, is the 5th member of the crew. I don't know why. I just find that very funny. But basically, I don't think we find out the details quite yet. But Krieg's crew got involved in the Grand Line a little bit, but I think that doesn't come up specifically till a later episode. We do find out that the Krieg's pirates are a whole fleet, or armada of like um, 5,000 men, I think they say in the kitchens while they're cooking. So at this point, Patty and Carney are talking in the kitchen, and they're like, "Hey, you beat up one of Dong Krieg's guys. Like, what if he comes back?" And Patty's like, "Ah, whatever. We'll just beat him up. If you're scared, quit." Um, which I find very funny. Um, Zeph isn't playing around at all. I love it. We get to see Luffy be the chore boy, and he is a goddamn menace. He starts by just sitting in a rocking chair, not doing anything because no one told him to do anything. And that pisses the chefs off. Um, so they tell him to go do some dishes. So Luffy starts breaking the dishes. And while the chefs are all bickering and doing the rowdy chef bit, they hear the plate shattering, and Patty runs over. And is like, "How many of those plates were you breaking?" And Luffy goes, "Oh, I forgot to keep count. I'm sorry." like he was doing what he was supposed to do, but he forgot to keep count of it for them. And Patty demands that he apologizes for breaking the plates, and then they tell him to just go clean, just go fucking clean. And then he trips and falls and knocks over like half the fucking kitchen. Um, During this, there are like the same 4 shots of the chef's cooking reused like 4 times. Uh, which is just again they don't have a ton of animation budget. It's fucking brutal though, watching the exact same cooking animation like 4 times in such a short expanse of time. Um, Luffy knocks over a bunch of shit while attempting to clean, and they tell him to just go out and take people's orders. Um, so he goes out, um, and sees the crew are there, and again, there's just some more tension. I think this episode ends with um Gin making his way back to his cruise ship. And we see that Don Krieg is still alive. And they're coming to the Barate. They're coming to the restaurant on the sea. And I think that was this episode. It was a good episode. A little slow at parts. And again, the animation, oh my god. So the animation in these 5 particular episodes was really bad sometimes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Junior,
Yeah,
I think I realized why Don Krieg looked so familiar.
he's a monkey.
Probably because he reminded me of someone like that had the exact same hairstyle and beard from Wallace and Gromit. That's probably why.
Ah, Wallace and you know what?
That's
That makes sense.
yeah, it's the one dude. That's why. That's why I thought he was familiar.
Who knew Don Krieg was the Wallace and Gromit crossover we all needed?
It was the Wallace and Gromit crossover everyone needed.
Did you have like a favorite moment in this episode, or anything else that sticks out to you that I didn't cover in my notes?
I mean, I liked when Gin was there and he was like really appreciative. I was like, maybe he's a really good guy, and
I
it's
I
like I really
literally
like
have in
him.
my notes, intro to Krieg, Gin is a good boy. I love Gin. He is one of like my favorite little side villains that gets introduced, and it sucks that he doesn't get used as much as some of the other characters.
It's like genuinely from seeing that, I was like, man, Gin's gonna join the Straw Hats and betray Don Krieg. It's gonna be great.
That would have been fantastic. I want to see that alternate timeline. I think Tekking 101 did do a video like what if Gin joined the crew, but I think he did that like 4 years ago or something. I don't remember. But I want to say he did a discussion video of that. If you don't know Tekking, he is another YouTuber who uh originally started doing Bleach reviews, and then when Bleach ended, he jumped around a little bit to a few other series and then sort of settled on One Piece. He does like daily discussion videos, and he's kind of cringe humor as a brand, but I like him. If you're not familiar, I recommend at least some of his videos if you can handle modest levels of cringe. Um,
It's
but
more than
Well,
just modest.
it's there are more cringe people. Tekking has his moments for sure. Thankfully, usually those are in the intro, and you can just skip through those if you have to.
I
Uh,
handle lots of cringe each day, so I should be fine.
but I highly recommend him. I've been watching him since Bleach, and when he moved over to One Piece, I was very excited because I love One Piece. I think my favorite moment of this episode is like when Gin is eating and Sanji is just chilling and Luffy is just chilling and the three of them are just having interactions together. However, there we also I didn't talk about it in detail because I for some reason I didn't write it out. We get to see Luffy interact with Zoro, Usopp, and Nami and Sanji while they're just eating at the restaurant while he's in the back trying to work. Um, and they're like, yeah, of course we're eating. Like, we're not working here. Why wouldn't we eat? And like Luffy like puts a booger in Zoro's water, and he's about to drink it, and Usopp and Nami are cackling. Um, and then Zoro grabs Luffy and forces him to drink it, and they're just making a ton of noise, and Nami is laughing, and oh my god, her laughter sounds so fucking pure. And we see Sanji see her laughing from across the room, and like runs over with a rose and falls to his knees because he's a fucking idiot. And it's so good because we like eat it up because later on you just don't get to see the Straw interact this much because shit is too busy. Like we still get moments of them doing cute things together, but like this was such like a wholesome, quiet moment where it's just them being a family, and I really took a moment to appreciate it. That's probably my favorite moment of the episode. Now that I think about it, just it's a stupid moment, but we get to see them just like really being a family, and I love that. I wish we got like 5 to 10 minutes of this every arc. And maybe we do in some ways, but this one just felt like extra tight, where it's such a small crew. But yeah, that's episode 21. What about you, Norco? Do you have a favorite moment?
Uh, 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 I don't know.
No, that's fair. I mean, sometimes it's hard to pick a
I like
favorite moment.
100%.
All right. Okay. That's a good first episode. We got a lot of build up for this Don Krieg motherfucker. Let's hope he lives up to the hype. And that leads us into episode 22, which I I have written down that it leads with what is it here? Um, oh, I think it leads with Luffy once again um trying to recruit Sanji and immediately into daddy issues. Between Sanji and Zeph, where Zeph shows up and tells Sanji to fucking leave, and he doesn't need him in the restaurant, and he's just a raucous boy who causes fights and then flirts with the girls and whose food isn't even very good. And Sanji up to this point is just taking the abuse until Zeph says his food isn't very good, and then he gets upset.
Fighting Nami.
Which I find very funny. Um, and like Sanji fronts up on Zeph, uh, upset because his dad just insulted his cooking and is telling him to leave because his dad doesn't need him anymore. Um, because Zeph in every possible way is Sanji's father, and we'll find out more about that as the story continues.
I did not know that. I would never have guessed that until you just said
Not
that.
not biologically. He's his father every other way. Um,
Okay.
we will find out their backstory in a flashback, but basically Sanji has been with Zeph, and we get a hint of that in one of these episodes we're covering. But Sanji has been with Zeph since he was a kid. Um, and we'll get to see exactly how that happened later, and then we'll get to see how that started way later. Because Sanji is the boy with two tragic backstories for extra sauce. Because every member of the Straw Hat crew gets their own tragic backstory. All of them. The one with the least tragic backstory is probably Zoro. Sanji's probably one with one of the most tragic backstories, and he's so special he got two of them. We're about to deal with one next week. Um, so there's a really funny scene where Zeph like kicks Sanji into the table where Nami and the rest are eating, and they're just all holding their food, and Zoro just has a plate balanced on his head. I don't know why, but I saw that in the animation, and it made me chuckle. I was just like, they all got their plates out of the way, and also Zoro has a plate on his head with a chicken leg, I think, which is very funny. And then in the next scene, there's a table again, and Sanji is giving dessert to Nami, uh, and just sort of fawning over her. And she's like, "Oh, I'm really hard up on money," and he's like, "Oh, for you, it's free." And then we cut to this scene where Zoro's just looking at this, and then he looks at Zoro and is like, "You guys are paying though," and Zoro's like, "You're really too predictable, man," which is great. Um, I just love it because it's a really good view into their future relationship. Um, I wrote down that there's a lot of really shitty animation at this part where there's just a lot of still shots and sound happening, like not actual animation, but again just a lot of PNGs with nothing moving. And then we're outside on a foggy day. We find out 4 days have passed. And the crew has just been like hanging out at the restaurant for 4 days, and Nami's just been eating free food that Sanji makes for her. And the other two are just putting up with having to pay for the meals. Um, and Luffy is still busy working away, trying to figure out a way to make Zeph forgive his dad. And we get this moment where Luffy just stops and turns and looks into the mist, because he senses Krieg's approach, which might be Haki foreshadowing. I don't know. It's weird how he can sense him coming from directly behind him. Like if he was coming from the way Luffy was facing, it kind of makes sense. But the way he stops, like he can sense a wild animal approaching the ship and turns around, it's just like it's way too like what he does with Haki later in the series. So I don't know. That was just a weird moment for me. Um, the restaurant customers there today see the ship coming and all begin to freak out. Zeph and Sanji come out, and there's a really cute moment where Luffy looks at Sanji and goes, "I wonder if Gin's come back to repay you for your kindness." And Sanji's just like, "I don't think so." At least Sanji knows that Sanji's a realist in a very interesting way, while also being an extreme romantic, which is fantastic. I love it. So we see Don Krieg's ship approach. It is this huge galleon. Like, it makes the Mary and the Barate look fucking tiny. It is massive. And it is currently beat the shit up. It is heavily damaged. And as you're looking at it, there are a bunch of like one-liners dropped by some of the members of the cast, that it doesn't look like cannons did it. Um, but the damage still looks sort of man-made, and they couldn't quite figure out how the damage to the ship was done. Um, but we'll figure that out at some point. So Krieg disembarks from his ship and comes down to the Baratier, with Gin supporting him. This massive monkey of a man um, needs to move with Gin's support at the moment because Gin's the only member of his crew who's eaten in like a week and a half. Um, Patty and Carne are being idiots, which is, funny, but it's their shtick. Um, and Krieg gets down on his knees begging to be fed. He said that he doesn't remember the last time he ate. He's pleading desperately for everyone, and Gin is trying to get him to stop because, Gin's a loyal servant of Krieg, and he's watching his captain, the man who supposedly rules the East Blue, with his massive pirate fleet, this weak, sobbing, begging mess. And he's like, Captain, please stop. I really don't want to see you like this. Um, we see Sanji go to cook for him because Sanji sees someone who's starving, and when Sanji sees someone who's hungry, he's going to feed them, and that is a very good part of Sanji's character that I really like and appreciate. We see all the other cooks whip out knives on him and tell him, "You're not fucking cooking for this mass murdering sociopath." Um, and we get that moment where Sanji's like, "You guys don't fucking know what it's like to be starving to death. I'm going to go cook food for him because he's here in front of me and hungry, and that's just what's going to happen." Um, which is great. Um, the pirates or the cooks all have this moment where they're talking among themselves, which is very um interesting to me. Because one of them just goes like, "Once he's better, he'll attack us right away," and I'm just like, "Yep, that's true." Like, yeah, I was like, "Yeah, that's definitely what's gonna happen over the next episode." Thank you, random chef. Oda's really pushing the effects of hunger, but Oda's doing this thing where he wants his cake, but he also wants another cake. Where he wants hunger to be this horrible, terrifying thing that's truly brutal to live through, like starving to death. And it is. But he also wants people to be perfectly fine after eating any amount of food, like instantly. And he's just like, that's not how starving works. Like, you eat food this fast, if you're starving, you're gonna throw up and go into shock and die. Like, I understand this is an anime, but you're carrying it a little too far. We find out about Krieg's MO from the cooks as they're just exposition dumping. Um, that he uses deception to kill and gain power and poison. And Luffy has a line where he's like, "Oh, so he plays dirty." He's like, "Yeah, that sounds like a pirate. Like, it's not a decent pirate. It's not the pirate I want to be, but he sounds like a pirate." Like, Luffy's very blasé, but he's like, "Oh, so he fights dirty. All right, good to know." Because we find out that Krieg would often fly a white flag as if he means to surrender, and when people came to accept the surrender, he would kill them. Or they would pretend to be Marines and get close to people and then kill them, and just overall being kind of a dick. Um, so of course Krieg eats food and then immediately attacks Sanji with like a clothes hanger. At which point the customers run out of the restaurant and we get a view of the Straw Hat crews watching this, and like 100 people run out of the restaurant. The animation is looped like for 4 seconds straight, and it's just a massive wall of people. And I'm like, there were not that many people inside the restaurant. that is an army of people. They just animated leaving there. I found that very funny. Um, we get a little bit of more information from Krieg. Um, he demands food for 100, because 100 of his men are still alive on the ship, though more have already died of starvation in the meanwhile. Uh, which is a pretty big deal because again he had a crew of 5,000 people, and now he has 100 people, who are all starving to death. Um, I think this is where like Sanji goes to cook the food, and everyone stops him, and they have that moment. Gin is apologizing to Sanji. Krieg has basically decided he's going to steal their restaurant. And he does give everyone the chance to just fucking leave. Like he does say, like, all right, you're gonna give me 100 meals. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna feed my crew, and while I'm doing that, you all can leave. I just want your ship. I don't need to kill any of you, and you are keeping me and my crew alive. So you know what? I will give you this mercy. Fucking leave, and I'll just take your ship, and we'll be fine. That doesn't go over well, of course, because all of the cooks are loyal to death, to the restaurant. Gin apologizes to Sanji, um, because again, Krieg promised Gin that they wouldn't attack the restaurant if he took them there. And we do get this more of a feeling that Gin is kind of like almost ready to turn on Krieg. Like you get this feeling that Gin is really feeling bad that his captain abused his trust in him and is attacking their saviors. Um, which is great. I just love Gin. I love him to bits. Um, Sanji again won't let people starve. He basically tells the other chef, if you're gonna fucking kill me, you better fucking kill me. Because if you don't and there's someone starving, I'm gonna go feed them. So Patty fucking decks him in the back of the head. Like Patty's like, okay. I've been waiting for a chance to beat the shit out of you, so I guess I'll take this one. Patty walks over to a wall and pulls out a lobster bazooka or a shrimp bazooka. I don't think this weapon gets a name. They name some of their shit later. Um, and he promptly shoots Krieg with a bazooka, like point blank range, and Krieg just fucking takes it. Krieg has like this massive golden armor on, um, and he retaliates by his armor popping out a bunch of hidden guns all over his body, which then shoot the chefs and give them a bunch of scratches because bullets don't hurt people. It's really, really funny to me. I just wrote down like no one dies because bullets suck. Um, he shoots up the chefs a bunch, and they look hurt and are all like, "Ah, no, we've been shot a bunch, but none of us are dead." Conveniently. Uh, and then Zeph shows up with this huge bag, um, of food and throws it on the ground in front of Krieg. He's like, "Ah, that's probably about enough for 100 people, I guess." And we hear some of the other members of the cookery, refer to him as owner Zeph, and we see Krieg like eyes go wide, and he's just like, "Zeph, to be continued." And it's just like, oh, Zeph is a person. Yes. Krieg recognizes Zeph. This is interesting. That is our cliffhanger for episode 22. Um, yeah, this episode didn't have too much in it because a lot of screen time was used with Krieg begging for food. Like almost like I think like 8 minutes are just like him just like begging for food, and the slow walk into the restaurant and the arrival of the ship. Like it eats up half the episode at least. But yeah, did anyone else notice anything of importance in this episode they want to cover, discuss? What was that, Noriko?
Krieg's name. I think I know why he's called Krieg.
Oh,
Because Krieg is German for war. And he keeps committing war crimes.
yeah. I think that's probably very accurate. I love that he like Don isn't his name; it's a title too. He's Don War basically. Um,
Yeah.
That sounds cool.
yeah, because he says that at one point, like I'm the only one strong enough to be worthy of the title of Don, and we will meet other Dons later, or they'll get brought up in the story, because we basically find out that there are crime syndicates in One Piece, like mafia, like actual mafia, like Italian mobsters, like those exist in
Well,
One Piece too. Um, and we find out about other Dons in different oceans. Um, but yeah, he's
I
Krieg.
think
He's the war criminal Krieg. He's a big piece of shit. Um,
Mm.
but he makes a
I
decent
think
villain.
I think episode 22 is the episode I remembered the least about.
Yeah, again, there wasn't too much here other than begging for food, getting food, demanding more food, and Sanji gets beat up a little bit because Krieg hits him, and then Patty hits him, and then there's the rocket launcher, and then the crew gets shot up, and then Zeph just shows up with food. Like not a lot happens. The real stuff doesn't happen until the next episode. That's when shit starts going down a little bit more. So let's dive into episode 23. So we find out that Zeph right away was some sort of great pirate. Um, and Zeph, in response, calls out Krieg for clearly losing in the Grand Line. Um, which is what happened to him. Krieg's crew basically went into the Grand Line, his massive fleet, 5,000 men, um, and they lost. Which is very funny to me because you'll find out much later, Rudy. But the first half of the Grand Line is referred to as paradise by pirates. And so I find it very funny that Krieg is supposed to be this huge badass, and he scrubbed out in paradise in less than a month. I just find it very funny. Um, but I mean, he also had exemplary circumstances, as we'll find out later in this episode. Um, Krieg brings up that Zeph's name was Redfoot Zeph because his foot was stained with the blood of his enemies, which is just metal as fuck. Um, but he's missing that leg, so clearly he's weak. Um, and there's a bit of foreshadowing towards Sanji's fighting style, which we haven't actually seen him do at this point, really, with his kicking and whatnot. And we do have a really good line, because Zeph brings up that as long as I have my hands, I can cook, which isn't so much foreshadowing anything specific other than just Sanji's mentality for never using his hands in a fight. Just this belief that he and Zeph both share that their hands are more important than anything else because as long as they have their hands, they can properly cook for people, so they can't risk that in combat. They can't risk hurting their hands. We find out that Zeph spent a year in paradise, a year on the Grand Line, and that Krieg wants his logbook, which Zeph says, fucking no. That logbook is the accumulation of all the memories of my beloved crew who are no longer with me. Like, I can't give it to you, it's too important. Krieg blames his loss in the Grand Line to a lack of information, and that if they had something like Zeph's logbook, it would tell him how to beat the people in the Grand Line who did this horrible thing to his crew, and that once he takes the Baradier, once he takes this floating restaurant and Zeph's logbook, he'll be able to go back to the Grand Line, stronger, better, with more information, and he'll conquer it and become king of the pirates and get the One Piece. So Krieg hit the One Piece button, so Luffy immediately walks into frame and goes, "No, you fucking won't. I'm gonna be king of the pirates." Um, because like up until this point, Luffy really doesn't care. Like he's again, it's Luffy. He's just kind of watching this as just like an observer. He's watching it like someone at a movie. He's got popcorn. He's like, "Oh, this is all weird. This place is really rowdy." And then he's like, "I'll get the One Piece. I'll conquer the Grand Line." And Luffy's like, "Wait, that's my thing." um, and walks up to Krieg and says as much. "I'm going to be king of the pirates, and not you, you piece of shit." And Krieg's like, "I'm not really in the mood for jokes, boy." And Luffy's like, "I didn't joke nothing. I just stated a fact." And that's what he says in the translation. Luffy's just like, "I stated a fact." Um, which is just, it's fucking beautiful. We cut away to see Zoro and Usopp have come to the stairwell, and they're like, "Hey, Luffy, are you a bit to scrap with this fucker? Do you need help?" Zoro's got his sword out. Usopp is shaking. I was saying, like, "But if you don't need us, that's totally fine, too." And Luffy's like, "Nah, man, I got this." So they both relax. But Usopp pretends to be more courageous. And Zoro, like, bonks him on the head with his sword and just goes, "But that's a lie." Um, I wrote down that I really love seeing Zoro and Usopp interact like this. because I don't think we ever get to see them being this close again. Like they're kind of always off doing their own thing later in the story. And they're like brothers. It's very funny to me. Like Usopp is this cowardly little brother, and Zoro is just the big Giga Chad older brother, and it's just very funny to me. I think last episode when Sanji shows up, and is flirting with Nami, Usopp like threatens him, and then immediately looks at Zoro. He's like, "Get him, Zoro!" And Zoro's like, "Fight him yourself, you idiot." I just love seeing them interact like this. I just really do. Uh, those little subtle interactions that I'm noticing on this rewatch when I'm paying like extreme attention to what's happening. Um, Oh, there's a moment where Krieg like even asks him like, "Oh, what are those? Those are your crewmates?" Like it's a pretty small crew, and he's like laughing because again he had a crew of 5,000 men and he couldn't last a week. And Luffy's like, "I have 5 people," and Sanji in the background's like, "You counted me again!" I'm like, stop it. Which is just great. I like that one, Luffy counted him again, and 2, he noticed Luffy counted him again and called him out on it. Krieg decides that Luffy isn't worth his fucking time. um, and goes to feed his boys. So at this point, we cut back to the Going Merry. We see Nami is once again holding that ominous wanted poster we saw from a few episodes ago. There's a moment where Johnny and Yosaku are trying to like get her attention because she seems like depressed, and they're just trying to cheer her up and distract her or see what's up, and they end up falling down and kissing each other, which because I don't know why. But whatever. Then we cut away and we see someone getting shot again. And I just wrote down bullets don't kill people, flashbacks kill people. I don't remember who got shot, but they didn't die apparently. Or this might have been when the chefs are all getting up, and I'm just like, man, none of them died, really. Um, but yeah, you'll find that bullets don't kill people in One Piece so much as flashbacks kill people. Once you see someone in a flashback, you have to be concerned because there's like an 80% chance they're gonna die. But if you see them in modern time, you can usually be pretty okay that they're not dead. Zeph tells all the chefs to leave. They refuse. They're like, nope, this is our home. We'll die protecting it if we have to. Um, but all the chefs are sort of like asking Zeph like why he would feed them, like why he gave them the food, like why are you making it out like Sanji did the right thing? Like why are you supporting Sanji? He brought this upon us. He fed that fucking pirate who then brought these other pirates here. Like if Sanji had just let him die, we wouldn't be dealing with this. And Zeph brings up that the difference between all of those cooks and Sanji is that between all of them, he is the only one who really knows what it means to be hungry and the horrors of starving to death. And like again, we don't know what happened between him and Sanji yet, but like they're really setting it up in these episodes, which I never really noticed before or paid attention to. So I found that nice. Um, we do find out at around this point that the Krieg fleet was taken down by one man. A singular man took out that fleet of 5,000. A man with a pair of hawk eyes. Which, if you'll remember, is extremely important to Zoro's whole shenanigan. Zoro on the stairs hears that a man with hawk eyes took out their ship, and he gets all fidgety and excited. Um, and basically, the man with the hawk eyes is the person that Zoro set out to find, which is so vague. Like I don't know why he does that. I don't know why he just says who he is. I don't know. Um, and Gin, I think Gin tells him this because like Luffy asks him like, because Gin is still there. Like Krieg left, Gin stayed, and Luffy's like, you went to the Grand Line, but you told us you didn't know anything. He's like, I don't. We got there and like within a week, one man showed up and killed all of us. And we barely made it out. And Zeph, when Zeph finds out that it was Hawkeye, he just starts chuckling and he's like, you probably interrupted his nap. So he decided he was just gonna sink you all for vengeance. And Gin's like, there's no way it could be something that simple. And I'm like, maybe. I could definitely see it if you woke him up from his nap. Um, so Usopp is at this point very fearfully suggesting that Luffy and them not go to the Grand Line if one man could take out 5,000 easily, like it was nothing. So we see what Oda is trying to like hint that is like like Luffy crying or something, but it's just him being like super excited. Uh, and there's a really cute line where Usopp's like, "We really need to like introduce fear to your brain somehow. Like we need you to understand the definition of this word." We get more cute Zoro and Usopp being like brothers together on the stairs. I love it. Um, on Krieg's ship, we see the crew eating and cheering and yelling at the top of their lungs and dying in shock, I guess, but whatever. And Krieg is all like, all right, good, we're gonna go steal this ship. And the crew's like, yeah, and it's like, then we're gonna get even more crew, and the crew's like, yeah, and then he's like, we're gonna go to the Grand Line again, and they're like, what? Krieg's all ready for round two, and they're all like, really? Can't we just keep being a big fish in a small pond? And one of them immediately gets shot. And I guess this time he dies because this bullet was a real bullet. And we actually see it like we see a through and through hole in this guy's chest when he gets shot. Like it's brutal. I'm like,
And then the other crewmates see a dead body, like, all right, yeah, to the Grand Line, woo.
better than getting shot. At least I could starve to death slowly. And at this point, while this is happening, we get a glimpse of this weird candle floating along the ocean. Um, which, spoiler, is the hawk-eyed man approaching. We cut back to that weird candle shot a few times, and this weird behatted figure. And then we see him standing up in his vessel, and then the fucking giant galleon gets cut in three, which is fantastic. People run out, and everyone's aghast and aghast. What could possibly have happened? The ship is destroyed, and Krieg's crew are all in the water, and they're like, the ship was cut. And Krieg's like, the galleon can't have been cut. This massive ship cut. And you see like really good animation of the ship sinking. Like this whole part of the episode is where all of the budget for like the last 5 episodes has gone. Like this is really well animated, and I wish the next few episodes were well animated too, but they're not. And it's so good, the animation of the ship sinking. And again, the ocean here is pretty shallow, so like it doesn't really submerge all the way. um but it's great, and they basically like, he's here, and we see it sort of floating along and whatnot, and everyone's like, oh my god, it's the strongest man. I don't know why they call him the strongest man. He isn't. He's just the strongest swordsman, but whatever. um and the crew, the Strides, run out, worried that their ship had got caught up in this. And we see Yosaku and Johnny in the water, and they explain that Nami tricked them and stole the ship and all the treasure. And they're all like, "What?" And then we cut, and we see the fucking pimp in his fucking coffin boat just floating along. And we get the zoom in on the Hawkeyes for the first time, and that's the end of the episode. So how was your introduction to Hawkeye? I won't say his name because we haven't learned his name, not till next episode. They just keep referring to him as Hawkeye. Takanome.
Oh, God. I'm so tempted to say his full name.
Takanome? Or do you mean like his actual name?
I mean his full name, like Hawkeye Hawk.
uh,
Just sounds cool.
Hawkeye. Well, I mean, you're missing his first name then, which is really important for his aesthetic. Uh,
Um,
yeah.
I thought his full name was Hawkeye Hawk.
No, Hawkeye is a title. Like Straw Hat Luffy or Buggy the Clown. Hawkeye is a title. He has a name. We do learn it. Uh, and I will tell you, it is Dracul. Because again, he's he's basically a vampire. He's basically Dracula. He's just floating around the oceans on a fucking coffin with weird ominous candles and a fog that always follows him. And he's got this ripped body he's always open chested, and he's got this crazy aesthetic going on with the mustache and the beard and the clothes and the wide brim hat. And his name is fucking Dracul Mihawk. It's just like, oh,
No,
so
they
you're just Dracula, okay?
No wonder he looks so cool. And
Yeah,
that's where
yeah, he's basically a he's
it's like where most of the design budget went. His face.
yeah, he he's made to look a lot better than most of the other people in the show. Uh, yeah, and again, we do find his name is Dracul Mihawk. Hawkeye is like a title because of the way his eyes look.
Mm.
Yeah, but they do all call him like Hawkeye, and Zoro keeps calling him like Takanomi no Otoko or something like the Hawkeye man. And I'm like, just call him his name. You know his name. He's the strongest swordsman in the world. You've been having like a hunt boner for this guy since you were a kid. Like you know his name. I don't know why he keeps calling him the Hawkeye man. Takanomi Otoko. I'm like, what are you doing? Stop it. Um, but yes, Dracul Mihawk. He is a big important character in the story who shows up really early. We will see a lot of him over the course of this story, interspersed. Um, but right now we sort of end with his coffin showing up. Because again, his ship is a singular coffin, with like a one little sail behind his head. Like it's not really a ship. He's just floating around on a coffin because he's strong enough to not give a fuck. Uh, and again, he's just rocking the vampire aesthetic. Like, I mean, he's such a pimp. Mihawk has a huge, huge fan base of just extremely horny fans. I am not saying I am not one of them, but he's not like one of my favorite characters. But I can appreciate a fine piece of ass when I see it. And that takes us into episode 24. Unless anyone has anything else they want to bring up about Hawkeye's arrival, where he cuts the ship apart.
No.
Oh, it's a pretty good moment. Um,
Yeah.
I love it. Like it's so good.
So fine.
Just effortlessly cut that ship like it's fucking butter. And Zeph is just acting like, "Yep, this is a thing." Like Zeph is not reacting to this at all, which is just like, "Oh, that's spoopy." And I guess this is just normal in the Grand Line. We'll find out later that it's not necessarily normal. Krieg definitely Krieg had bad luck.
It's like Don Krieg definitely like thinks that Mihawk is chasing him. It's
Well,
like,
I mean,
oh
he
god, he's
is.
chasing up the Grand Line.
He is. He
He's
did.
after us.
That's the thing. He did. He's just, and they ask him why in the next episode, and his response is, "I'm killing time. Like you boys piss me off, so now I have something to do. You made my list of things to do, and it was an empty list. So yeah, I'm here. Like I'm gonna fucking." That's basically his whole shtick. Was they bothered him somehow. We don't know the specifics. Again, Zeph hints that they interrupted his nap. I am totally willing to accept that he was just asleep in his fucking coffin on the Grand Line, and the Krieg pirates showed up making a bunch of noise and woke him up, and he got grumpy and just started sinking all of their ships and killing everyone. And they're like, "Fuck, we gotta run away." And he's like, "No, you made me moderately upset. I have nothing to do with my life. I am coming for you. This is my week now, boys. You gave me a thing to do. Let's go. Keep running. Let's see how far I go." Like he chased them to the fucking East Blue. Like you'll find this out relatively soon, Rudy, but you don't just leave the Grand Line. You
Unless you're
can't.
Hawkeye and Hawk.
You can't. Like part of the reason Krieg is so fucked up is not from Mihawk, it's from leaving the Grand Line. You just don't do it. Like the Grand Line is literally a barrier preventing people from accessing the other oceans. Being like in One Piece, this is just a bit of world building that we find out later that's not super important, so I don't mind talking about it right now because it's relevant. But basically, in One Piece, you sort of just live in the ocean you're born in. Traveling between oceans is super difficult and almost impossible for the average person unless you're a marine. So the fact that Krieg managed to flee the Grand Line is impressive. And the fact that Miyagi just fucking chased him, like, "I'll just go back," is really fucking funny to me. But that takes us to episode 24, and we open immediately with the flashback for Nami's betrayal with Johnny and Yosaku, who are dumb. And I wrote down Johnny and Yosaku are dumb, like very dumb. in my notes, where she tells the boy she's going to change her shirt, and for some reason isn't going into the ship to do that. She wants to do it out in front of the restaurant, like in view of like windows and shit. She's like, "Hey boys, can you just turn around? I want to take off my top and change." And I'm like, "What, Nami? You're just like in front of a restaurant. Like, I mean, don't." And the boys are like, "Oh, she's so bold." And they turn around and are like, I wonder if it'd be okay to like take a peek, you know?" And it gets real quiet, and then she's just there and throws them overboard. Um,
So she kicked him overboard.
she grabs them by the head. I think she just pushes them by the face.
Oh,
Yeah, I think so. Because I vaguely remember a scene, like a weird scene where her arms are crossed. Cause she's got like each of them by one head, but her arms are crossed while she's doing it. Um, she calls out to them and tells them to tell the boys because they're like, "What are you doing, Big Sis Nami?" And she's like, "Well, I'm a thief who steals from pirates, so this is just business. But tell the boys I wasn't with them very long, but I had a lot of fun." And like, it gets really kind of ominous when she says that because she means it. We'll find out later that she means it. Um, and then she takes off with the ship. She takes off with the Mary. So Zoro immediately is upset. Zoro is like, that bitch. I knew she'd fucking do this. God damn it, Luffy. And Luffy fucking just looks at Johnny and Usopp, like, "Your ship is still here, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's right over here." And they're like, "All right, Usopp, Zoro, get in the ship. Go after her. We can still see the Mary. We know where she's heading." And Zoro is just like, "Luffy, just let her go. I mean, we can get more treasure. We can get another boat." Usopp is furious that she took the gift that Kaya gave them. Like, Usopp is like, "Kaya gave us that boat. That's our boat. She doesn't get to take our boat." And Luffy just looks at him and goes, "No, she's the person who's going to be our navigator. Go get her." And there's like a stare down between like Luffy and Zoro for a moment, and Zoro's just like, "You're so fucking high maintenance. All right, let's go." Which is very much, very much in keeping with Zoro and Luffy's relationship later, which I like. Um, And yeah, so that's the plan currently. They ask Luffy what he's going to do. He's like, "I still technically have to work shit off with the old man. I'll figure it out and come after you. Just don't lose her." Um, at which point Zoro and the gang see Mihawk sailing between the wreckage of the ship, and Zoro gets sword sighted. He gets excited. The sword boner is strong with this one, and we cut away. Um, to Krieg's men pulling themselves out of the water, and one of them pulls a pistol on Mihawk and like ask him why. Why did you chase us? Like, what are you doing this? Why? And he just goes, "I'm killing time." That's his reaction. It's just like, you pissed me off and gave me a thing to do, so now this is what I'm spending my time doing. Because otherwise I was just gonna be napping, but you interrupted that, so now this is what I'm doing. Um, so the guy takes two shots because he's got like a weird double barrel pistol. He fires two shots at Mihawk, and ever so gently, he just twists his sword, this massive black blade, and it just ever so gently hits the bullets, and they just changes their trajectory just enough to fly past him. And the guy's like, "What happened?" And Zoro's just like suddenly behind him. We have no idea how Zoro got over there, or why he's behind Krieg's men. But he's just like, he ever so gently deflected the bullets with his sword, the tip of his sword. I've never seen a man move a sword so gently. And we just see Miyako like, "Well, a sword style based just on strength will get you nothing." And I'm just like, "Oh my god, what is this weird dialogue?" But alright. So Zoro gets really excited. And this is where we finally get Mihawk's name. Like, it is right now. All this time, they've just been calling him again. They've been calling him Takanomi, or Hawkeye. But now we find out his name is Mihawk. I don't think we actually find the full name to even later, where we find out his name is Dracul Mihawk. I don't know. I just love his name. Um, so Zoro basically challenges Mihawk because this man is, as we're being told, the strongest swordsman in the world. And we see like Johnny and Yosaku trying to rush after Zoro, because Mihawk said something insulting to him, and Luffy pulls them back and holds them. But we see that Luffy is also having a really hard time not rushing in to fight with Zoro. Like, Luffy is, like, really trying hard not to go in. He's trying to do the right thing. And we have this beautiful interaction between Mihawk and Zoro. And I read out the quote from Mihawk where he gets off his coffin and stands in front of Zoro. And Zoro, like, puts on his haramaki that he wears as a headband and puts his sword in his mouth because he's a fucking idiot and draws his swords. And Mihawk says, if you were even close to being good enough to fight me, you'd know you're not good enough. And I'm like, oh, that's such a fucking brutal line. Like if you think you can actually fight me, you are so far away from ever being able to fight me. Because if you were even close, you'd be able to sense the gap between the pair of us just standing in front of me. And it's just like, oh, Zoro's gonna die. Oh, Zoro, no, don't do it. Um, and there's a moment where Zoro's just like, well, I won't know till I do it. So let's fucking go, baby. And Mihawk's like, is it courage or ignorance? Like, which one is it? And Zoro's like, ambition, baby, let's go. And I'm like, he's getting hyped on adrenaline. So what Mihawk then does is pull off his necklace, which is in the shape of a cross, because again, he's like a weird Catholic vampire. And inside that necklace is a little cheese knife. And he brandishes the cheese knife towards Zoro, and Zoro's like, what's this? And he's like, I'm sorry, I don't have a smaller bladed object, so I'll have to just beat you with this. Is that okay? And Zoro's like, what? And he's like, listen, you might have had a bit of a name for yourself here. You might be well known as some sort of badass swordsman. But the East Blue is really weak, and I'm gonna show you just how weak you are. And I think this is the first time we get confirmation from someone from outside of the East Blue that the East Blue is the weakest sea. Like, he just says, among all four of the seas, the East Blue is the weakest. So even if you have a big name here, you're nothing compared to the weakest people in the other places because they're just stronger than here. So we see Zoro open with Onigiri, and he goes into Onigiri, he dashes forward, and then all three blades are pinned together by the fucking cheese knife. Like, in a moment, Mihawk flung his cheese knife out, caught all three of Zoro's blade mid-attack, and is holding him frozen in place with the tension of his extended arm. And it's like, oh, Zoro's gonna die. It's just like, oh no, my boy, my dude, this is like episode 20. There's like 1,000 episodes to go. Why are you doing this now? This is bad timing. Um, it's just effortlessly how he stops Zoro with the cheese knife. And we cut to Johnny and Yosaku, and they bring up that Onigiri is Zoro's never fail technique. It's never been blocked before. No one's ever been able to read it. And to be fair, the like twice we've seen it, it's worked. And to be fair, almost every other time we see Zoro use Onigiri, it works. Like, Mihawk is one of the few characters who just flat out stops the attack. And Zoro has a bit of an existential crisis because he's like, I can't move. I can't fucking move. How could the power between us be so great? Is it really that big of a gap? Have I not been training for years and years and I'm not even anywhere near close enough? And at this point, they start fighting. And this is where the animation really sucks. And I wish the animation was much better. Because the fighting just kind of becomes Zoro just flailing. Like, it doesn't. A lot of the animation when Zoro's fighting doesn't make Zoro look like he's good with swords. Like, and I hate it. Because he's good. He's supposed to be this really well-trained swordsman. But the animation is just Zoro swinging around like a fucking idiot. And then occasionally, like, even half the time there's not even like parrying sound effects. Like, half the time, like, Mihawk is just sort of moving and missing, and then every so often we hear the ting of him like blocking with the little cheese knife. um and that happens for like a minute, and Zoro's like exhausted because wielding three fucking swords, swinging them constantly for like a minute will fucking kill a man. Like, that's hard to do. Like, they're not light, and it's just exhaustive to swing your arms that much. um and like, he's just like panting, and there's just Mihawk just standing there with his fucking cheese knife, like, hey, sup? And like, Zoro's like mid swing, and he's having this existential crisis, and he hears Um, the voice of his friend, whose name I can't remember. What was her name? What was her name? It'll come back to me. Let me go to my notes. What was her name? It started with a K, right? Shit. Shit. What was the name of Zoro's friend? Anyone?
Oh god. Yeah, it did start with no.
What episode? It was episode 19, right? Yeah,
I
Zoro
mean, what are you
Flashback.
talking about?
Kuina. Okay. Kuina. He hears Kuina's voice and it causes him to freeze for a
Oh,
moment mid swing. And there's a moment of flashback, and as he's like remembering their promise and how he's not, and that line of him like he'll become strong enough that his name reaches the heaven, and it's just like he's losing to a man with a cheese knife. At which point fucking Mihawk karate chops him in the back of the neck, and I don't know why. It's really funny to me that he just like karate chops Zoro. I don't get it. Um, so Zoro like goes down, he gets back up. Once again, Johnny and Yosaka seeing Zoro get hit. Like they try to rush in, they're pulling their swords. Luffy pulls them back and is holding them back. But you can see that Luffy is also like having to physically stop himself from rushing in to help. Um, so we get that moment of Zoro's promise, and it's not just Kuina. He has that moment where he is introducing himself to Luffy, and he's like telling Luffy about how he wants to be the greatest swordsman in the world. And Luffy says, well, I mean, if I'm going to be the king of the pirates, you'd have to be the best swordsman in the world, wouldn't you? The king of the pirates couldn't have anything less from his swordsman, right? And it's just this weird moment of like, oh yeah, Zoro, like, really cares about Luffy at this point. And that promise, like, that idea that Luffy will be king of the pirates. So Zoro has to be the greatest swordsman to live up to Luffy. And it's like a really cool thing because it kind of starts to overpower his promise to Kuina a little bit. We'll find out more about that later, in my opinion. But I really like that moment. The fact that Zoro has the flashback with Kuina first, but then that moment with Luffy is very good. So Zoro goes to use his tiger trap, I think he calls it, or something, or dragon twister. He goes to use one of his techniques, and fucking Mihawk just stabs him in the chest. Uh, and Zoro no sells it like a pro, like a goddamn wrestling pro. He just takes it. Um, and there's this beautiful moment where like everything, like all the color goes into the screen, and then some blood drips down and color comes back in, and Zoro is just standing there with Mihawk's sword stabbed into his chest, and Mihawk just says, I wrote it the whole conversation, so I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it verbatim because it's a really good moment. Uh, are you going to let me kill you? Like, why aren't you retreating? Because Zoro has not pulled away from the dagger pressed in his chest. Like, and Mihawk is literally like, "Are you going to let me stab you in the heart? Like, I don't understand." And Zoro, through clenched teeth, because again he's holding a fucking sword in his mouth, goes, "I don't know why, but if I pull back even a step, I feel like those important things such as pledges and promises in the past will be shattered." And Mihawk's is like, yes, that's what being defeated is. Like that's what defeat is. Yeah, those promises, they're going to be shattered. You're not strong enough. And it's
this
really
is
good. It's so good.
this is where one of my favorite parts of these 5 episodes comes in,
Oh
because
yeah.
it's like Mihawk says to Zoro, like Zoro is so good in his eyes that it's like, I will remember you.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like, I just like that part a lot.
Well, at this moment, so up until this point, he's referred to Zoro as Weak One. Like when referring to Zoro, he calls him Weak One, but as he's got his dagger, like the only reason he hasn't stabbed Zoro in the heart is that he's so good with a sword that he's stopped himself from stabbing Zoro in the heart. And when he has that question, like, why aren't you pulling back? Like, why aren't you retreating? I'm going to kill you. And Zoro just goes, I think if I get defeated by you, that everything I've worked for and all the promises I've made will be ruined. And Miyaga's like, yeah, that's what defeat is. And Zoro just goes, I'd rather die. Like, Zoro is just like, then fucking kill me, because I refuse to accept defeat. Like, you need to kill me then, because I'm not going to retreat. And it's so good. See, I might not have cried with the whole Kuina shit, but I did get a little teary eyed during this, because I have a soft spot for Zoro when he pulls shit like this, and this was really good. Especially the whole moment where he's like, where Mihawk's like, yes, that's what defeat is. And Zoro's like, well, then I'd rather die. Like, that gets to me on an emotional level. Um, and this is where Mihawk, like, seems to notice Zoro. And he's just like, oh, alright, this might be a big fish in a very small pond. I think he actually refers to him as a frog in a well, I think is what he refers to him as. Because Mihawk is a very colorful use of words. But this is the moment where he's like, oh, this guy has a fire that most swordsmen don't have. He's weak now, but he has the character to get stronger later, and that seems to like turn Mihawk on a little bit. So he pulls back with his little kitchen knife, his little cheese knife, and puts it away. And he calls Zoro Strong One. And again, up until this point, he's only referred to Zoro as Weak One. He called him that like 3 times. And now that he realized Zoro's resolve and the measure of the man that Zoro is, he actually calls him Strong One and pulls. We don't know the name of his sword yet, but I believe it's called Yoru, which just means like night. The sword's name is just night. He pulls the black blade from his back, which is foreshadowing to black blades being a thing in One Piece, and we'll find out what makes them special later. Um, and we see Zoro do this really stupid thing where he starts spinning his 2 swords around in his hands, and goes to use a secret technique of the 3 sword styles, Sentoryu Ogi. They clash as Miyagi dashes forward with Yoru, this massive 2-handed black sword that he used to cut the ship apart. We see him fly past Zoro as Zoro strikes his swords out, and then we see the 2 swords in Zoro's hand shatter. Not the one in his mouth, because that sword is much better than his other swords. It's just crafted better. It's a famous sword. Um, and we get a moment where Zoro, like drops the hilts of his broken swords, and he's not willing to admit defeat, but he admits that he lost. It's weird. Defeat and losing are sort of different in this moment. Um, and Zoro takes out the Wado Ichimonji, puts it back into its scabbard, turns around to face Mihawk, because Mihawk is now behind him, and throws his arm wide because he's lost the fight. He's not strong enough to beat Mihawk, and he knows that now, and he lost 2 of his swords. Um, and Mihawk looks at him like he's still got Yara ready, because he's still like, Zoro's still standing. He's got to put the boy down. And he's like, what are you doing? And Zoro says one of the most badass lines that he says in all of One Piece. And he just says, scars on the back are a swordsman's shame. And Dracula's just like, admirable. And then fucking cuts him straight down the chest. He's like, oh, you fucking balls, you little kid. I fucking love you, man. I'm gonna cut you real good. They're weird. They have like a weird like S&M thing going on. I don't know. This is Zoro, man. I never interacted with that part of the fandom who's like deep into the roleplay of canon characters and whatnot, but I get a feeling that Zoro gets to be a little M a lot of the time. Oh my god. So Zoro gets fucking slashed across the chest by the sword we just saw cut a ship in 3. Um, Sanji has a moment where he screams out because he's just watching this happen. He's like, is your ambition that important? Isn't it just easier to just abandon your ambition? And this is again foreshadowing that. And like, there's a moment where Zeph watches him while Sanji's watching this and sees Zoro get cut down, because we've been getting this feeling between Zeph and Sanji over these episodes that Sanji would really love to leave with Luffy, but he has this ambition that he's abandoned for Zeph, and Zeph knows he's holding Sanji back, but Sanji won't listen to him to leave. We find out more about what that is later. Um, but this is a really good moment where they cut to Sanji and he says this thing about, just isn't it easier just to abandon your ambition and live, than cling to it and die? But Zoro doesn't care, and that's the type of man that Zoro and Luffy are. However, once Zoro goes down, Yosaku and Johnny dive into the water, uh, to go get him, and Luffy fucking jumps across the water, revealing to Krieg that he's a devil fruit user before the Krieg fight, which is just like, God damn it, Luffy, you're just giving away free intel. Fuck, damn it. He gets his head stuck in the wooden ship, and Mihawk's just hanging out because he's like, oh, you must be that man's friends. And Luffy like pulls his head out, and he's ready to fucking go to town with Mihawk, which fucking is not a good idea. We do see one point where Luffy and Mihawk almost fight in the future, and thankfully at that point Luffy is strong enough to actually realize that Mihawk will fucking kill him. So he's where Mihawk thinks Zoro should be now, which is great. It's a good moment. We'll see it later. I'm a big fan. And Luffy's ready to beat the shit out of him for killing Zoro, and Mihawk just goes, "Don't worry, I didn't kill him." And we do see Zoro somehow is alive with these two huge gashes across his chest. And the scars from these wounds will never go away. Anytime we see Zoro topless, he will always have this bisecting scar across his chest from where Mihawk almost cut him in half. One Piece is really a story of seeing what weird scars Oda decides Zoro is permanently going to get. And he gets a lot of them. Zoro gets really fucked up over the course of this series. Mihawk seems to really like the pair of them. They seem to have a good vibe. And he asks him, "What is your goal?" And Luffy says, "I'm gonna be or just like the Pirate King." And Mihawk like chuckles and goes, "It'll be harder than surpassing me, you know." And Luffy's like, "Well, I won't know till I try it, will I? Like, I won't know till I do it. So how about you?" And then he sticks his tongue at him like, like, "You can't scare me, bitch. I don't care. This sign can't stop me. I don't know how to read." Like it's very much that meme kind of energy from Luffy. Which I fucking love. There's a moment on the ship which is very good where Zoro calls out to Luffy and he holds the Wado Ichimonji up even though like again he's almost cut in half by this sword. It's like a bleach level wound. It's brutal. And he's crying. And he swears to Luffy that until he beats Mihawk, until he's strong enough to beat Mihawk, he'll never lose again. And he says to him, "Because I have to be the best for the Pirate King." Like he just calls Luffy the king of the pirates here. He just says it like outright. Not "you will be the king of the pirates." He refers to him as the Pirate King. He's like, "That's that all right with you, Pirate King?" And Luffy's just like, yeah." Like, yes. I'm like, all right. And then Tom Creek shows up because he doesn't fucking learn. And Mihawk just looks at him and goes, "You really don't fucking learn, do you?" Um, however, Mihawk is satisfied, basically. Like again, he was just trying to kill time with them. And Don's like, "Well, now I'm ready to fight back. I'm tired of losing. I'm gonna get you." And Mihawk's like, I don't care about you. I had a lot of fun with those two kids. Like, I'm ready to leave. I'm out of here." That's not good enough for Krieg though, so he shoots a bunch of things at him, like bam, cannons, and Mihawk is just gone. Like Mihawk just fucking disappears. Cause it's Mihawk and he's basically a vampire, and he does that. Um, that moment you brought up, Rudy, when Mihawk is like, telling Zoro like, "Grow strong, fight me again, I'll remember you." That is where we hear his first name, because I believe he properly introduces himself as like, "I am Dracula Mihawk, and I'm the strongest in the world, and one day I want you to find me again." Like, it's in that speech, I believe, where he drops his first name as Dracula. I think he properly introduces himself when he says he's gonna remember Zoro. And then the episode ends, but there's this really annoying scene where the cooks are talking because Luffy has jumped back to the ship now, and Krieg is talking, and there's no animation for either of them, and it's just a still PNG with voiceover. But like they're just talking. Like Krieg is talking, but there is no animation, and I'm like, "Oh my god, you couldn't do lip flaps for this? You couldn't reuse lip flaps for this? There was no like editing time at all? I don't know. It just this episode was sick, and then they end it with just like a bunch of talking with no animation at all, and I get really annoyed. But that was episode 24, and it was fucking sick. Oh, there's so many good moments. I have never forgotten the line, "Scars on the back are a swordsman's shame," ever. It's so good. Uh, and it makes me kind of sad because in one of our first fights with Zoro, we see him get stabbed in the back by fucking Buggy's crew member because Buggy just stabbed Zoro in the back. I'm like, oh, that scar's a shame, isn't it? Because he just got fucking stabbed in the back by a dagger. Uh, that was a good fight. How did you like it? How did you like this episode? It was pretty good. Almost made me cry. I was really into it.
And the 24th episode is probably my favorite of the 5 we watched this week.
Oh, definitely, definitely. This one had so many good moments. This is a standout that I think might make a lot of people's like top 10 episodes kind of list. Like this episode with like Zoro and Mihawk meeting for the first time and Mihawk meeting Luffy for the first time, and yeah, this is a great episode. It's really good. What about you, Noriko? How do you feel about it?
This is my favorite episode in the East Blue Saga.
Ooh, high praise. It is not my favorite episode in the East Blue Saga. Oh, I like that. Ooh, that's a spicy take. I think this is definitely my favorite episode we've seen so far. Uh, but we'll see my favorite episode when we get to it. There is a moment that stands out to me even more than scars on the back or a swordsman's shame. Uh, and it's just someone saying "help me," and I'm just a really weak man. And when someone says that and means it, I start to cry. So when we get to that episode, it's gonna be really hard recapping it because even just thinking about it makes me want to cry. All right,
Well, what episode number is it?
what episode number? I don't know. Probably like 36, somewhere's around then. It's in the next mini arc. We'll get there. It's in the next storyline. Because there's only like 2 storylines left, and then one really good filler arc, and then we're out of the East Blue. Like we are chugging along. Um, so that takes us to episode 25, and the last episode we're going to talk about today. Um,
Almost halfway through.
so it opens up with Luffy making a deal with Zeph, and him going, "Hey, oh man, if I beat the shit out of Krieg and make him leave you all alone, can we call my deal even?" And Zeph is like, "Yes, dear God, yes. If we had you here as a chore boy for a year, we'd go to business. like you're gonna destroy my fucking restaurant if we let you stay here for a year. Please take care of them." Um, at this moment, we see Krieg talking to his crew about how the restaurant is the perfect cover, and they could use it to lure people in and then kill them and just do more underhanded tactic shit. Like like he just talks about how the restaurant on the sea is a brilliant gimmick they could abuse to kill people easy, and I'm like, man, you're fucking scum. And someone else is just like, do we really need to be doing this? So he shoots him. Like it's just like a repeat of the other episode. He has a moment here which I find really funny for Krieg because it just shows his ignorance. Um, because he talked a little bit about devil fruits when he saw Luffy House one because he apparently knows they exist. He seems to think that Zeph's logbook has the secret to fighting people with devil fruits, and he thinks Mihawk has a devil fruit. He says there's no way a normal man could cut through the ship. He must have a devil fruit. And I'm like, nah, I don't think Mihawk has a devil fruit. I mean, at no point has Oda ever said he has a devil fruit. And I mean, if he had a devil fruit and was still just floating around in a fucking coffin, that'd be pretty ballsy. um, but I do love that moment where Krieg is just like refusing to admit that Mihawk is just that much stronger than he is. So he's like, he must have a devil fruit. Once I find the secret to fighting people with devil fruits, I'll beat him. But no. There's more non-animation in this point, where just a bunch of shit is happening that like nothing is being animated, which is annoying. We get some teasers to the Sanji flashbacks, which are nice. We get to see a few frames of young Zeph looking like a boss. Um, we get to see a few images of Sanji being thrown off a ship. We see flashbacks of Patty and Carney, but that's a little bit later in the episode. Um, so we see the Krieg pirates swimming towards the restaurant. Luffy rockets out through the restaurant door and hits them with the Gummo Gummo no giant scythe, which I think is the first and only time we ever see this technique. I don't think he ever calls it a giant scythe again, so that's pretty unique. Um, Luffy has a lot of one-off Gum Gum attacks that we never see again. Beats up like a whole horde of the crew at once, and Sanji's just like, holy shit, he did that? Like the shore boy is that strong? And there's this great moment where Zeph is like, I want you to watch him. I want you to watch how he fights. I don't want you to take your eyes off him till Krieg is defeated. Like you need to learn something from this boy, and he's gonna give you a life lesson I haven't been able to yet, which is good foreshadowing. Krieg calls out to Luffy that's like, oh, you're pretty ballsy coming to fight it here on the wreckage of my ship on the water where there's no solid ground. I know you devil fruit people are anchors. And the cooks all react like, what? That's really dangerous that he's out there doing this shit then. But Sanji doesn't seem to notice because that becomes relevant in like 2 episodes, and Sanji doesn't react. I don't know why they paid so much attention to the cooks hearing that Luffy can't swim at this moment. But then later Sanji doesn't seem to know that fact. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Um, at this point, Patty and Carne show up with the Mackerel Head 1, which is a little ship that comes out of the front of the ship. This is big foreshadowing for later, and I just wrote down in my notes, who made this damn restaurant? Frankie? Because it's very much, this is kind of Oda's style happening without Oda having a good excuse for it. The little mini ship coming out that they use to go gather supplies and has cannons and shit is very much something Oda does later, where like there's just ships with ships and ships that do things, and it's just, I don't know, I found it very funny. We see them shoot Krieg in the chest with like 3 cannons, and he just fucking takes it because his armor's really strong. And to be fair, as much as Krieg is a piece of shit, he's really physically strong because he picks up the fucking boat Patty and Carne are on and fucking throws it at the restaurant. Like he just picks up an entire ship and throws it one-handed, which is actually impressive. And this is the first time we actually get to see how strong Sanji is. Like we saw that he hurt full body, but we never got to see him doing the hurting. But he jumps up super high into the air and kicks the ship down into the water. Um, he tells one of the crew members to go open the fins to the ship to prevent the pirates from getting into the restaurant. So one of the pirates went and did that, and a pair of mechanical wooden fins popped out from under the ship, kind of giving it like a balcony area, which I'm sure would be great for like outdoor tables and whatnot during the summer months. You know, probably a beautiful, beautiful thing to eat. Um, and we have this beautiful line where, as the ship lands and Patty climbs out of the wreckage, he yells at Sanji, "You're trying to kill us!" And Sanji's just like, "Yep," just like, "Yep, sure." I mean, I figured I'd take this chance, right? I found that very funny. We see the chefs are. We've seen that these chefs are tough, and they have a reputation for being very tough. But we also see them immediately getting their ass handed to them for the most part, except for Patty. Um, because the Greek pirates is their better armor. Because like the ships are fighting with like cooking utensils and shit. Like the pirates have actual weapons, and though they were literally just starving to death a few minutes ago, and then got blasted by Mihawk, they're still all standing. I don't know. It's weird. Um, we see that they're not all that strong. The chefs, at least not compared to actual pirates using weapons. As this is happening, we see Pearl beginning to climb his way out of the water. We get our first actual instance of the kick course in the show, where Sanji jumps into the middle of a group of people on his hands and just starts fucking kicking like a fucking idiot. I love it. We've seen this in the opening theme song for every episode so far, but it's our first time seeing the kick course delivered in an episode, which is super fun. And Luffy is just giving commentary to all of this. Like Luffy's just like, oh, he's just like watching and reacting to the fight, and Craig's like, hey, you idiot, I'm still here. So he blows up the mast Luffy is on, and Luffy jumps off, of course, and jumps over back to the ship. At this point, Pearl has shown up and has been monologuing with this huge armor and this massive pearls and everything, and he looks like an idiot. And Krieg, when he blows up the mast, it falls and hits Pearl in the fucking head and causes his nose to start bleeding. So we see everyone in the Krieg's pirate freak out and be like, "No, Pearl, it wasn't a fight. It's just a nosebleed. It's a nosebleed. You're not in danger." And Pearl doesn't listen and goes, "I am in danger," and sets himself on fucking fire. Because I know when I'm concerned that I might be in danger, I think the first thing I should do is set myself on fire. Uh, I think that's a reasonable reaction to being possibly in danger.
Yes. It's a protection method to make sure nobody hurts you because ouchie fire.
It's so fucking dumb. I love it. Uh, we do see this moment where Pearl's on fire and just starts setting shit on fire everywhere. Sanji jumps into the middle of the flames, and everyone's like, "Oh no, you'll get burned, Sanji, you'll get burned." And Pearl's just like, "But even the most wild animal runs away from my fire." And Sanji's like, "I'm a fucking cook. I work in a kitchen like all day. This is just fire. I use this all the time. Like, what cook would I be if I'm afraid of fire?" And he kicks Pearl in the face. Um, so Pearl freaks out and starts launching more fire pearls to set more things on fire. We see them heading towards the restaurant, and we have this beautiful thing of Zeph kicking with his peg leg, and the sheer like the force of his kick puts out the fire from the pearls, which is badass. Because even though he's only got the one leg, he can still kick pretty hard. Um, which is fantastic. Um, we see the fight continuing. Um, Krieg decides he's just gonna break the fin, and to prevent the fire from spreading to the ship, he throws out this huge iron ball. Luffy catches it and bazookas it back to block, which impresses Sanji. He's like, he just fucking hit back that huge iron ball. Holy shit! And Krieg just watches it hit beside him. He's like, dag nabbit, like that darn kid. Um, at which point I believe the cannonball that Luffy bounces back hits something that collapses and then drops another beam onto Pearl's head, this time knocking him just clean out. Which I want to bring up is fucking hilarious because Pearl only gets hit by Sanji once. The attack that triggers the whole fire incident was Krieg, and the the attack that knocks out Pearl is Krieg. Like Krieg both triggers the fires happening by attacking Luffy and dropping something on top of Pearl. Oh, he drops Luffy onto Pearl. Luffy jumps in and hits Pearl in the back of the head when he lands. That's what happens. And then the second time, it's the mast falling down that hits him on the head and knocks him out. Okay, I remember now. So yeah, Pearl gets taken out by Krieg. At this point, we hear a grunting sound from behind, and everyone turns around and gasps. Gin has knocked down Zeph and has a gun to his head, and has pinned the old man to the ground. And his demand, and at this point, like everyone's looking at him, and Gin's trying to maintain composure. And we hear Krieg yelling out for him to kill Zeph, and they can easily take the ship once the cooks are demoralized. And that's the end of the episode. And the end of our recording week. How did you feel about that ending on the cliffhanger with Gin having Zeph at gunpoint?
I'm gonna
Pinned
be
to the
honest.
ground.
I think Gin is gonna get absolutely destroyed.
That is an
I
interesting
don't think Zeph is
hypothesis.
gonna go down that easily.
That's interesting. That's interesting. We'll definitely see how that turns out. Uh, I like that we get to ask you these questions because me and Noriko know what's going to happen. It's nice to have someone who doesn't know what's going to happen. I like that. Um, but yeah, that's a good climax. I think a lot of the stuff with Pearl probably overstayed its welcome a little bit. A lot of it was just kind of a little too much, but we got to see a lot of really good Luffy here, good slapstick. And again, just further proof that Luffy is really fucking strong. And Sanji realizing that Luffy is really strong, which is very good. I'm really excited. I think the next 5 episodes are going to be really good. I'm pretty sure they wrap up the Sanji arc in the next, I want to say, 3 episodes. And then I think we have to rush to catch up to Nami and the Going Merry. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on my episode numbers. I'm doing this all from memory, so it's difficult.
If we judge off the opening, the next, I guess, big bad guy after Don Krieg is the one with the sharp looking harpoon nose.
Yeah, the one from the wanted poster. Yeah, that is the big bad next, and we'll get to him, and it's fantastic. I don't know if you know this, Rudy, but we're at the end of the episode. Before I bring this up though, Noriko, do you want to bring up anything about this episode or this bundle of 5? It has your favorite episode in the East Blue Saga, which is super cool.
Nothing to add.
All right, awesome. I'm gonna be curious to at the end of the East Blue Saga to ask Rudy what their favorite episode of the saga was. Um, so I wanted to bring up shit. I interrupted myself because I wanted to make sure Noriko had a chance to. Oh, I remember. Rudy, I don't know if you are aware of this, but the whole East Blue sort of saga, like this whole part coming up, in the next little part, I believe was remade into a movie, with updated graphics, and the whole movie's like I think an hour and a half long or a little bit longer.
It's
Maybe.
very bad.
Is it?
Um,
I saw the animation looked
It's
okay.
bad.
Oh,
The
well now I'm
animation is
sad.
good, but the shit is bad
Yeah, all
because
right.
I
it's so rushed.
probably
Everything.
Yeah, they do rush everything. I wouldn't recommend watching it until after
I
we completely
probably would
finish
have
the East Blue.
stuck to the series anyway if the
Yeah,
movie is exactly the same,
it it is. It's
like
just
sort of
rushed, but
coverage.
it's one of those things where like I'm a real pervert of One Piece. I'll watch it anyways because I just want to see the new animation and whatnot. But once we finish the East Blue saga and move into the next thing, if you do want to look it up, that does exist. And again, it's a nice little movie to see some of these cool scenes, but maybe like done up in the more newer animation. They did this with a few of the first arcs of One Piece, where they sort of uh, crammed the big action parts of the arcs into movies. But I don't know how the pacing on them works because I'm much more familiar with the other movies that
It's
are
just
not the
bad.
remakes. Yeah, I mean it's not as good as watching the episodes, of course.
Probably with One Piece movies, I probably watch movies that aren't covered and like stuff that isn't covered by the series.
Yeah, there are like 13 of those at least, so don't worry, you got a lot of movies to watch.
Oh yeesh.
And there's a new one coming out this year. I'm in Japan too. I could theoretically go see it in theaters
Fuck you.
They
and not understand anything because they sure as fuck won't have English subtitles.
you just whip out a Google Voice Translate or something.
Yeah,
Maybe
for the
you
whole
can
movie.
understand.
For the whole movie. Honestly,
It's just like turn your phone off and then just hear this English voice of the movie just repeating.
it's a One Piece movie. I don't expect it'll be too complex. Most of the dialogue in One Piece you can just sort of half-ass your way through anyways because it's usually relatively simple. Um, depending on the characters who are talking. But we've been going for about an hour and a half. If there are no further comments about these 5 episodes, I think we should wrap up.
I don't have anything else to share.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming by. We'll be back next time with episodes 26 through 30. Oh baby, we are like officially at the halfway mark of the first arc already. You're getting there, Rudy. No time at all. We'll be in Wano before you know it. All right, everyone. I've been Junior. This has been Rudy and Noriko. It was a lot of fun talking to you today. We'll be back for more One Piece next time. Goodbye.
Bye bye.